get more in detail about these things as we go along. And then we have our set with the throne on top of her head. And I could say I could do a whole lecture just talking about our set. But see, if you see at the top of her head, she has a throne, and she's in a yoga pose. All of these positions that you see the ancestors doing, these were yoga positions, okay? And they had certain physiological and bioenergetic effects upon the mind, the body, and the internal energy systems. And that throne represents the fact that all authority comes from her, okay? The king was not the king unless he came from her. And so, you know, today we see a very strong disrespect for what you would call the sacred feminine, okay? I traveled in Egypt this past summer, and you could just see the total disrespect for the feminine, you know. The way women are treated, the way even we was treated when we tried to just go into a temple and just do some yoga or do some meditation. They say, no, you can't do that in here, even though we were doing the exact same thing that you saw on the walls of the temples. So they're making money from you being a tourist, but they don't want you to do what you're looking at there. You know, we come from a cosmic consciousness. Everything in the universe comes from the same source. And so what you see is some pictures from the, taken by this telescope, the Hubble telescope, and you're seeing like the birthplace from where stars come from. So what you're seeing here is this big clump, which is like billions of light years in size and billions of light years away from where we are. But we're seeing like the actual formation of what we would call stars. And the moon, the sun itself that we rotate around, that our planet circulates around, is a star that began in this way. Here you see another illustration. It's almost like a fallopian tube with the eggs coming out. And these are actual stars being birthed into the universe. And so this dust and gas that you see here is the raw ingredients from which everything in existence, everything that we see, no matter what form or shape it's in now, it started off from this source. And so when we start to practice yoga, meditation, we begin to become aware. We become re-aware, or our awareness that's been taken away from our true existence, our true nature, begins to return. We say that the ancestors always sat in these meditative positions. You know, so when you travel to Kemet or to Egypt, you know, which we call Kemet. Kemet is the proper name, which means land of the blacks or the black land. You know, we see these statues all the time. You look at the facial expression. You look at the fact that they're sitting up straight, both feet flat on the floor. Everything is symmetrical. They were in a state of meditation. They were in a state of perpetual meditation. They emphasized that. And this is expressed throughout all of their different symbolism, all the different symbols and icons that you see when you travel there. Inside of the Great Pyramid. Inside the Great Pyramid is a stone sarcophagus where they say that the pharaoh was buried at. This was a tomb for him. They built this big pyramid as a tomb for him. But they never found a sarcophagus there. They never found a body there. They never found a mummy inside of this big, gigantic monument that the Egyptologists tell us is a tomb. And so some people like myself speculate that this was a place where they used to do meditational work and energy work. And this is an illustration of the pyramid showing some of the connections it has with cosmic astronomy and astrology. You know, different stars that lead from shafts, different shafts that lead up to various stars, important star systems, you know, in the universe, and so on and so forth. So the principles of the Kemetic yoga are that we have an adherence to the principles of Ma'at. Ma'at means universal balance, harmony, and justice. And so in ancient times, we believed that the universe, operated off of these principles that represented order, that there's a certain order in the universe and we needed to become part of that order. And so every person who became Pharaoh took an oath that he would uphold the principles of Ma'at. Anytime a person graduated from their equivalent, what we would call college, they had to take that oath. And the whole purpose of being was that they was going to uphold Ma'at, because that's the order by which the foundation of everything that's existence is based upon. Second principle, Kemetic yoga, recognition of Kemet and ancient Africa. So we relate back to Kemet. One of the motivations for doing the research back in the 70s to discover the African roots of yoga was because we saw people becoming integrated into what I would call foreign types of ideologies and philosophies concerning yoga, and without really realizing that you need to go back to the root. When you go back to the root, we see that all civilization, all religions, all spiritual systems have their foundation in ancient African thought. And so that's what we want to do. We want to return to that root. Meditation is a perpetual state of being. So what that means is that we should always be in this state of meditation, or at least we should always strive to be in that state of meditation. That means we want to always maintain ourselves in a state where we are centered, where we are focused, where we are in control, where even though you see us walking around in the world, we're not really in the world. We may be here physically, but our consciousness is at a higher place. And therefore we're resisting and have immunity against the negative effects of stress, the negative effects of all the different negative forces that we see that try to take us out in various ways. Communication with the ancestors. African religion, African spirituality is based upon a respect for the ancestors, based upon understanding that the ancestors are alive and that we communicate with the ancestors, and ancestors are active in our lives. That's why we do libation, So the ancestors are not just somebody who's dead, who don't exist anymore. There's life after this physical existence that we live. And so Kemetic yoga recognizes that. Performance of Kemetic movements and postures. Now we just not getting into doing different positions, different movements and postures. So we understand that there are many what we would call traditional movements and postures, which are essential for maintaining the health and wellness of the body and maintaining the health and wellness of the energy systems through which energy is able to move and flow through the body to keep us healthy. Flowing with the breath. In Kemetic yoga, we move in a fluid manner, and we use the breath to take us from one pose into the next, so that we are flowing from one pose into the next. Achievement of Asar and Asethood. So Asar and Aset are like the prototypes of consciousness that we want to achieve as a male and as a female. That we want to be able to achieve the same example of behavior and consciousness that they achieve. And it's what we call spiritual transformation, or a mentor. A mentor represents that state of consciousness where we have transcended all of the various restrictions that come along with living on the terrestrial plane, or living on this planet. But instead of being part of this planet, being part of the restrictions, we are elevated. And we'll get more. I'm going to get a little bit more into detail about some of these concepts. So people in ancient Africa, or Kemet, they practice yoga. People in traditional African society practice yoga. And I'm going to show you examples. They may not call it yoga, but they do the equivalent of what you can call yoga. People from the African diaspora practice yoga. When you go to, when I was a little boy, I used to go to a little, what you may, I don't know if this is even a good word to say, but we call it the Holy Roller Church, right? Where people would, like a little storefront church, and people would get sanctified, and My little sister right there, I think she might remember that church. But people get sanctified and roll around on the floor. They say the spirit has, the Holy Spirit has got into them and stuff. In yoga, we call it the Kundalini. There is a life force. There's a connection. In African society, in African spirituality, we see this same concept. It's not, it's expressed and talked about in a different way, but it's the same thing. But the operating force is that there is a life force in the body that is awakened, and that life force connects you with the higher divine energies around you in the universe. And that's what happens when people say that in Christianity, when people say that the Holy Spirit has came into them, or in African society, when people say that the ancestor or the deity has come down and inhabited their body. The original people of India were of African descent and practiced yoga. So even when you look at India, you have to look at the fact that those original people were African people. The original people all over the planet were African people originally.